Every journey has a beginning and end, also for villains like Ganondorf, and in Breath of the Wild there were a number of references back to where it all started in Ocarina of Time, the Great Plateau, the Zora's Stone monuments and Lon Lon Ranch. But the most important of these is the fact that Calamity Ganon originated from a male member of the Gerudo tribe. With the reveal of Breath of the Wild 2, the existence of Ganondorf in the era of the Wild was definitely confirmed, and with the previous information and a moving Hyrule Castle at the end of the reveal, there was no one else I could invite to collab in this theory than Masked Nintendo Bandit, who will help us puzzle possibly the premise of Hyrule Castle, its final destination, and Ganondorf's journey in Breath of the Wild 2. The latter which we'll cover over on his channel after this video. But before we begin, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, as it's time to once again go inside Breath of the Wild 2.
Ocarina of Time's Hyrule Castle and town, where it all began. The kingdom following the construction of the Temple of Time, and the castle where Princess Zelda and the Hero of Time watched Ganondorf kneeling in front of the King of Hyrule after the Hyrulean Civil War. Following the timeline split in the era of the Hero of Time, this castle, town, and temple ceased to exist and remained uninhabited, with only imposing ruins reminding of its former glorious past. In Breath of the Wild, the original seat of Hylian royalty and power returned once again in the form of the Great Plateau, and elevated divine piece of land which might play a much more important role in Breath of the Wild 2 with Ganondorf's return. But let's take it from the beginning. Breath of the Wild began at the Great Plateau as we left the Shrine of Resurrection, entered what used to be Castle Town, and then, upon a long journey, returned to face Monk Maz Koshia. This battle is said to have prepared us for the battle ahead, and after mummified Ganondorf's introduction at E3 2019, it seems that this experience will serve a solid purpose in Breath of the Wild 2.
The Great Plateau is indeed the most important location in all of Breath of the Wild's Hyrule. According to Creating a Champion, it serves as the site of the final stand and resting place of King Rhoam, the main Sheikah Tower, the final trial in Champion's Ballad, and very likely the final battle against Ganondorf in Breath of the Wild 2. But why? The possibly moving Hyrule Castle and the lack of Sheikah technology. In Breath of the Wild, upon leaving the Great Plateau, the only way to return is by teleporting to either its ancient Sheikah Tower, the Shrine of Resurrection, or the Shrines of the Plateau. What do all of these have in common? They all require the Sheikah Slate, aka Sheikah technology, to teleport to. Then what if we cut out the Sheikah Slate, towers and shrines? We end up locked away from the Great Plateau. Now what is missing in Breath of the Wild 2? Sheikah technology, which means that we are unable to reach the Great Plateau by teleportation, unless we are able to clear a path to it through its blocked main gate. Then we'll not have any access to the Great Plateau, the birthplace of the kingdom in most of Breath of the Wild 2. Quite ironic when it was the tutorial area in Breath of the Wild. More importantly, this premise might set the plateau to become the best possible refuge for Ganondorf after he breaks free from his seal and escapes with the likely movable Hyrule Castle, bringing the castle back to where it all began all those eras ago, to the original castle town and Temple of Time, only now completely uninhabited unless you count Monk Maz Koshia deep underneath the plateau.
The perfect lair for Ganondorf until Link or Zelda make their way up to challenge the King of Evil to a final confrontation, which will likely not occur until the end of a very long quest. Until then, both the plateau and the castle will be inaccessible and mark for a big contrast to the open from all sides Hyrule Castle found in Breath of the Wild. The scenario is likely to unfold like this. After Link and Zelda have looked for clues of Ganondorf's whereabouts in Zora's Domain and Kakariko, and possibly completed a number of Zonai temples on the surface of Hyrule, Link and Zelda finally reach the source of the calamity and Hyrule's suffering. Ganondorf, however, breaks free, and seeing the fully powered Master Sword and himself weak after being sealed for tens of thousands of years, escapes and causes Hyrule Castle to move from its current location and moves it around Hyrule. At first, much like in Studio Ghibli's Castle in the Sky and Howl's Moving Castle, and this concept art of Ganondorf on a floating mountain from Creating a Champion, it might be floating in the air. However, sooner or later it will run its course and land in a new location, and there are reasons to believe that it will be the Great Plateau. How is this? As we have already established, it is the only location in all of Hyrule that is a literal fortress, unreachable from the ground, unclimbable, and with no teleportation blocked. Imagine this happening. Actually, we don't have to, as it is pretty much the identical premise to every Zelda game with a Hyrule Castle or Ganon's Tower. That one location that is there, sealed off and unreachable until it's time to conquer the final dungeon and boss of the game.
Just what Monk Master Koshia prepared us for above the Great Plateau in Champion's Ballad's final battle. Remember, the original plan of the Sheikah before the failure 100 years prior was to seal Calamity Ganon away, which meant that Link, just like previous Hylian champions, was only to weaken Calamity Ganon and leave it to Zelda to seal it away. However, after Ganondorf succeeded with his plan to release Calamity Ganon, attack and take over all the divine beasts and guardians, destroy the Kingdom of Hyrule, and finally knock out Link, the Sheikah changed their plan to not only contain Calamity Ganon, but also kill its creator, Ganondorf. Which brings us to the point itself. If Link and Zelda succeeded 100 years ago, the Great Plateau would never have served any purpose outside of Zelda's scientific excursion to the site. The Shrine of Resurrection would not have been utilized to keep Link in stasis, the Sheikah Slate would not have been handed over by Princess Zelda, the Sheikah Tower of the Plateau would have never been raised, and Monk Master Koshia would have continued to wait until Ganondorf would have finally succeeded. Due to Zelda's late awakening and Link's fall, stopping Calamity Ganon became only the first half of the true quest, and that the final and much more demanding half would be the hunt after Ganondorf. Monk Master Koshia, however, wouldn't let us face this next stage of our quest until we had shown that we are worthy of the title of the true hero of Hyrule.
That would also explain why the battle against Dark Beast Ganon was a joke, as it wasn't Link's final battle, just a puppet. The real Ganondorf will certainly live up to the hype provided by Monk Master Koshia, a battle which will constantly be in the air, but first take place when we grow strong enough to storm the main gate of the Great Plateau from surface level and battle our way up through its depths to areas that have been kept away from us since Breath of the Wild. A familiar homecoming, but this time with Hyrule Castle back where it belongs, next to the Temple of Time and the ruins of the original castle town from Ocarina of Time. The ruins of its original gate from Ocarina of Time are still there, and the location is waiting to once again serve as the great seat of the Kingdom of Hyrule, which after the massive genocide 100 years ago doesn't need a bigger capital than the Great Plateau can provide. Pre-Calamity Hyrule Castle Town is history. The future of Hyrule lies in its original founding location, the Great Plateau. Though first, Ganondorf needs to be dealt with. And unlike Hyrule Castle from Breath of the Wild, where we could swim our way straight to the final boss, things might be much more challenging this time around. Imagine if we not only have to make our way through the layers or floors of the Great Plateau, but also Hyrule Castle itself, with a game that, unlike Breath of the Wild, might begin easy and then get harder and harder. Despite getting stronger, you can only imagine how tough this final dungeon will be.
Then you have the final battle against Ganondorf to end it all once and for all. What the Hero of Time initiated tens of thousands of years ago. What place other than the Great Plateau, the original capital of Hyrule and the founding site of the Kingdom of Hyrule, is more fitting to conclude the era of the Wild and put a decisive end to not only Ganondorf, but possibly even the Miser's Curse. The battle against Monk Master Koshia could in this context have served as a trial, foreshadowing things to come, much like Phantom Ganon did to Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time. Preparation for what every confrontation against Ganondorf culminates to, a battle for the complete Triforce between the forces of power, wisdom, and courage. And there you have it, our argument on how Breath of the Wild 2 might bring us back to the Great Plateau to finally end the hatred that incarnated in this location in Ocarina of Time. If you haven't already, make sure to leave a like for this video, subscribe and press that shiny notification bell if you haven't already, and then head over to Masked Nintendo Bandit's channel, where we will study not Link and Zelda's way to the Great Plateau, but rather Ganondorf's journey from Ocarina to the final confrontation in Breath of the Wild 2. A big thanks as always to all our patrons on patreon.com/commonrealm, which we hope you also will join. And now make sure to go and check out Masked Nintendo Bandit's part of this collab on his channel. We will see you in the next one.